There's a new uniform in the spiritual marketplace. Mala beads around the neck, sacred geometry tattoos, linen pants that suggest detachment, a voice that drops an octave when speaking of the medicine. This isn't consciousness, it's costume. The modern spiritual man has become a walking performance. Every gesture curated, every word calculated, every breath theatrical. He doesn't walk, he moves with intention. He doesn't eat, he nourishes his temple. He doesn't have sex, he makes conscious love. And he hasn't separated from his partner. He has consciously uncoupled from her. Everything branded, everything performed, everything theatrical. But consciousness isn't a costume you put on. It's what remains when you stop dressing up. The truly conscious man looks unremarkable. He speaks normally, he moves without ceremony, because consciousness doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need Sanskrit or spiritual names. It doesn't require sacred symbols. It doesn't need spiritual aesthetics. Consciousness is invisible, structural, silent. But silence doesn't sell. Structure doesn't photograph. Invisible doesn't get followers. It's not attractive for Instagram. So men dress up their emptiness in spiritual drag. They perform enlightenment for Instagram. They costume their consciousness for credibility. They decorate their dysfunction with sacred symbols. I'm a conscious masculine leader. I hold sacred space. I'm a ceremonial facilitator. I channel divine wisdom. I activate dormant DNA. But when you strip away the costume, when you remove the performance, when you delete the spiritual resume, what remains? Usually the same unconscious patterns, just with better branding. The same ego, just with spiritual vocabulary. The same dysfunction, just with sacred decoration. I've watched men in full ceremonial regalia manipulate with precision like they have practiced. I've seen conscious leaders driven by the same wounded ego as any corporate executive. I've witnessed sacred space holders who can't hold their own presence without an audience. The costume has become more important than consciousness. The performance has become more real than presence. The aesthetic has become more valuable than authenticity. This is spiritual materialism at its peak, where consciousness becomes another thing to acquire, another identity to wear, another product to sell. The man in the consciousness costume needs you to know he's evolved. His very presence is a performance of depth. His every word a demonstration of wisdom. His every gesture a display of awakening. But the conscious man, the actual conscious man, doesn't need you to know anything. He doesn't wear his evolution. He doesn't perform his presence. He doesn't display his depth. He doesn't post it on social media. He just is. Clean, clear, and unremarkable. You might walk past him and never know you just encountered consciousness, because consciousness doesn't advertise, it doesn't perform, it doesn't have a social media account, it doesn't costume itself. It simply exists, it functions, and it serves, without declaration, without demonstration, without display. The spiritual costume is just another mask, another way to avoid being actually seen, another performance to hide the absence of real transformation. When you need others to know you're conscious, you're not conscious. When you need to display your spirituality, you're performing spirituality. When you need to wear your evolution, you're still becoming. Real consciousness doesn't need recognition. It doesn't need validation. It won't wear a costume. It exists independently of perception, of audience, of acknowledgement. Take off the mala beads, drop the sacred vocabulary, remove the spiritual persona. What's left? If nothing remains, you are never conscious, you are just costumed. If presence remains, if clarity remains, if structure remains, then you never needed the costume in the first place. The invitation isn't to become more spiritual. It's to become more real, more centered in truth, less fragmented, clearer signal. To strip away performance, to remove the costume, to delete the persona, and to discover what remains when you stop pretending to be conscious. That's where consciousness lives, not in the costume, but what remains when all costumes are removed. Welcome to The Architect Speaks.